Picture this. It's November, in medieval England, and the last harvest has been gathered from frozen fields. Snow already covers the ground, and it won't melt until April. For the next 5 months, not a single crop will grow, no fresh vegetables will be available, and every scrap of food must come from what's been stored in barns, cellars and granaries during the brief growing season. A family of 8 peasants stares at their winter food supply, knowing that this pile of grain, preserved meat and dried vegetables must sustain them through the darkest, coldest months of the year. One miscalculation means starvation. One storage failure means death. How did they do it? How did medieval farming communities survive winter after winter, when failure meant extinction? The answer lies in a sophisticated system of agricultural planning, food preservation, and community cooperation that was refined over centuries of life and death necessity. Medieval farmers didn't just grow crops and hope for the best. They developed scientific approaches to seasonal survival that involved precise calculations, elaborate preservation techniques, and social networks that shared resources during crisis periods. They created entire economies based on storing life itself, transforming summer abundance into winter survival through knowledge, skill, and unwavering determination. Medieval winter survival began with harvest calculations that were literally matters of life and death. Farmers had to balance competing demands for their limited grain supply: enough seed for next year's planting, sufficient animal feed to keep livestock alive through winter, adequate human food to prevent starvation, and surplus for trade to obtain essential non-agricultural goods. Getting these calculations wrong meant disaster for the entire family and potentially the entire community. Experienced farmers developed sophisticated formulas that accounted for family size, livestock numbers, expected winter duration, and anticipated consumption rates. They knew exactly how much grain each family member required per day, how long different storage methods would preserve various foods, and how to adjust quantities based on the quality of each year's harvest. These calculations were passed down through generations as closely guarded family knowledge that could mean the difference between survival and starvation. The most critical decision involved determining seed grain reserves that absolutely could not be consumed regardless of winter hardships. Eating next year's seed meant abandoning farming and facing certain death when spring arrived without crops to plant. Farmers developed elaborate mental and physical separation systems that protected seed grain from desperate winter consumption, creating storage methods that made seed supplies nearly impossible to access during moments of desperation. Food preservation represented the backbone of medieval winter survival, requiring an entire arsenal of techniques that transformed perishable summer abundance into stable winter sustenance. Each preservation method required specialized knowledge, proper timing, and careful execution that could determine whether food remained edible for months or spoiled within weeks. Master farmers understood the science behind preservation, even without understanding the biological processes involved. Grain storage required the most sophisticated techniques, because cereals formed the foundation of medieval diets and represented the largest volume of preserved food. Farmers built specialized granaries with raised floors that prevented moisture and pest infiltration. They used layers of straw, ash, and herbs to create pest-resistant storage environments. Some regions developed underground storage pits, lined with stone and sealed with clay, that created naturally temperature-controlled preservation chambers. The timing of grain storage was critical to long-term preservation success. Grain had to be completely dry before storage to prevent mold and rot. It required protection from rodents, insects, and moisture throughout the winter months. Farmers developed inspection routines that allowed them to detect spoilage early and salvage uncontaminated portions before entire stores were lost. They created rotation systems that ensured older grain was consumed first, while newer supplies remained in optimal storage conditions. Meat preservation involved multiple techniques that produced different types of preserved protein for various winter needs. Salting created long-term preserved meat that could last for months, but required expensive salt that many families couldn't afford in large quantities. Smoking produced flavorful preserved meat using local wood resources, but required constant attention and proper weather conditions. Drying created lightweight preserved meat that stored efficiently but had limited flavor and required careful preparation. The most ingenious meat preservation technique involved coordinated community slaughter events. where entire villages cooperated to process large numbers of animals simultaneously. These events allowed families to share preservation resources, exchange different cuts of meat, and pool their labor for maximum efficiency. Community slaughter also created social opportunities where preservation knowledge was shared between generations and families. Dairy preservation created another category of winter protein that required specialized knowledge and equipment. Farmers learned to make cheese that could age throughout winter, while improving in flavor and nutritional value. They developed butter-making techniques that produced preserved fats essential for winter nutrition and cooking. Some communities specialized in specific dairy preservation methods that became trade goods exchanged with other regions. Vegetable preservation required understanding of different crops and their optimal preservation methods. Root vegetables like turnips, carrots, and onions could be stored fresh in cool cellars throughout most winters. Leafy vegetables required drying, salting, or fermentation to remain edible. Some communities developed sauerkraut and other fermented vegetable products that provided essential vitamins during winter months when fresh produce was unavailable. The most challenging aspect of medieval winter survival involved managing the psychological and social stresses that accompanied months of scarcity, confinement, and uncertainty. Families spent long winter evenings in small, crowded spaces, with limited activities and declining food supplies. Community tensions could escalate when resources became scarce, and neighbors competed for survival. Successful winter survival required social skills and community cooperation, as much as food preservation techniques. Medieval communities developed elaborate social rituals that provided psychological support during difficult winter months. Religious festivals created opportunities for community gathering and shared celebration during the darkest times. Storytelling traditions provided entertainment and preserved cultural knowledge during long winter evenings. Work-sharing systems allowed families to assist each other with essential tasks, while maintaining social connections. The economics of winter survival created complex trade relationships that extended far beyond individual farm boundaries. Families specialized in different preservation techniques and traded surplus preserved foods with neighbors who had different specialties. These trade networks created regional food security systems that reduced individual family risk while maximizing community survival rates. Urban-rural trade relationships became essential to winter survival for both agricultural and non-agricultural populations. Farmers traded preserved food for manufactured goods, tools, and services they couldn't produce themselves. Urban craftsmen provided preservation equipment, storage containers, and specialized tools that improved rural food preservation capabilities. These economic relationships created mutual dependence that strengthened both agricultural and urban communities. The guild system extended to food preservation and winter survival services, with professional organizations controlling access to critical preservation resources and knowledge. Miller guilds controlled grain processing and storage facilities. Butcher guilds managed meat preservation and distribution systems. Baker guilds provided bread-making services that transformed raw grain into edible food throughout winter months. Religious institutions played crucial roles in medieval winter survival by providing emergency food supplies, coordinating community assistance programs, and maintaining granaries that could support communities during crisis periods. Monasteries developed sophisticated agricultural techniques and preservation methods that were shared with surrounding communities. They provided sanctuary for families facing starvation and coordinated charitable food distribution during severe winters. The most dangerous aspect of medieval winter survival involved managing crop failures and harvest disasters that threatened entire communities with starvation. Bad weather, pest infestations, or disease could destroy harvests and create emergency situations where normal survival strategies became inadequate. Communities developed crisis management protocols that included emergency food sharing, coordinated foraging for wild foods, and desperate measures like eating seed grain or slaughtering breeding animals. During crisis winters, communities implemented rationing systems that distributed available food based on family size, contribution to community welfare, and survival priority assessments. These systems required difficult decisions about resource allocation and often involved choosing which community members would receive adequate nutrition and which would face malnutrition or starvation. The social and ethical challenges of crisis management tested community bonds and leadership structures. Foraging for wild foods became essential survival skills during emergency periods when preserved food supplies were exhausted before spring arrival. Experienced foragers knew which tree bark could be ground into emergency flour, which roots remained edible throughout winter, and how to prepare otherwise inedible materials for human consumption. This knowledge required detailed understanding of local ecosystems and seasonal food availability. The transition from winter survival to spring renewal represented the most critical period in the medieval agricultural calendar. Farmers had to balance consuming remaining food supplies with saving energy for spring planting activities. They needed to maintain breeding animals and draft animals while preserving seed grain for optimal planting conditions. The timing of these decisions determined whether communities would thrive in the coming year or face another survival crisis. Medieval winter survival techniques created the foundation for modern food preservation, agricultural planning, and emergency preparedness systems. The preservation methods developed by medieval farmers evolved directly into commercial food processing industries. The seasonal planning approaches they developed influenced modern agricultural economics and food security planning. The community cooperation systems they created provided templates for modern disaster response and mutual aid organizations. The psychological strategies medieval families used to cope with seasonal scarcity and uncertainty remain relevant for contemporary communities facing economic hardship, natural disasters, or other survival challenges. Their emphasis on community cooperation, resource sharing, and long-term planning provides insights for modern resilience building and emergency preparedness initiatives. Most importantly, medieval farmers demonstrated that human communities can survive extreme seasonal challenges through careful planning, accumulated knowledge, and cooperative social systems. They proved that survival depends more on community wisdom and mutual support than on abundant resources or advanced technology. So how did medieval farmers survive winter without starving to death? They developed sophisticated survival systems that combined scientific food preservation with precise agricultural planning and community cooperation networks that supported families through the most dangerous months of the year. They created regional economies based on stored abundance that transformed prosperity into winter survival through knowledge, skill, and unwavering commitment to community welfare. They understood that survival required both individual preparation and collective responsibility, creating social systems that shared resources, knowledge, and risks in ways that maximized community survival rates. They developed agricultural techniques that balanced human needs with natural cycles, working within seasonal constraints to create sustainable survival strategies that supported communities for centuries. The next time you open a refrigerator or visit a supermarket and take year-round food availability for granted, remember the medieval farming family calculating grain reserves by candlelight, knowing that miscalculation meant death, and that survival depended on knowledge, preparation, and community support that had been refined through generations of life and death necessity. If you enjoy the hidden sides of medieval life, hit subscribe and give this video a like.